Hey, Montel Williams here. Look, I've got some incredible news to share with you. I want to tell you about my brand new book that's coming out that's called The Sailing of the Intrepid. Now, this book is more than just an historical account. It's a tribute to the brave men who served aboard the USS Intrepid and a celebration of their extraordinary legacy. Writing this book was such an incredible story, and I'm really thrilled to be able to share it with you. So don't wait to grab your little piece of history. The book is available right now to order. You can go to montelmedia.com, and you can even get a limited autograph signed copy. Now, thank you so much for your support. I can't wait for you to read this incredible story of the sailing of the Intrepid. I'll see you on the pages. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Free Thinking with Montel. This is a show where we explore ways to improve our lives, our health, and our mindset. Today, we're talking about a topic that might seem like it belongs in the boardroom, but it's just as crucial in our everyday living rooms. That topic is leadership. Not leadership of a company, but leadership of our own life. And we have the perfect guest to help us navigate this is Mr. Adam Mendler. He's a nationally recognized authority on leadership. He's a creator and host of the top-rated podcast, 30-Minute Mentors, where he's interviewed more than 500 of America's most successful leaders. He teaches leadership at UCLA and has built and led businesses across various industries. Adam, thank you so much for being a part of Free Thinking with Montel today, sir. Thanks for being here.
Montel, thanks for having me on. Great to see you again.
Absolutely. Good to see you again. It's great to have you. You know, you spend your life talking to and teaching leaders about leadership. But many of our listeners out there might think, well, look, I'm not a CEO. I'm not a manager. Why do I need leadership skills? How do I bridge the gap between corporate leadership and personal leadership? How do you do that?
Oh, Montel, I love that question. And that is a misconception that unfortunately so many people have. So many people think that you need to be called a leader to be a leader. You need to have a title on your business card that says manager or says CEO or says something that makes people think that you're a leader to be a leader. Whereas in reality, every single one of us has the opportunity to be a leader every single day. Leadership starts with how you show up. Every day, every one of us has the opportunity to do things in different moments of our day where we have decisions to make. You are at a grocery store and someone needs your help. Someone is in front of you, or you're going to open the door for them and be a leader. Or you're going to push a button for someone when you see that they need your help in the elevator or when they're trying to cross the road. Little things add up to big things. But leadership starts with you, it starts with how you show up every single day.
It's such a good term, especially I like the idea of how you show up. That's what it's really all about, preparing yourself to actually be prepared for any situation that may come across your path, right?
100%. And Montel, you know as well as anyone, you don't know what today is going to bring. You have no idea what's going to happen this afternoon, tonight. Life is unpredictable, but there are a lot of things that we can't control. What can we control? We can control how
Uh,
we show up. We can control our mindset. We can control our attitude. We can control who we surround ourselves with. The most successful people focus on what they can control and not on what they can't control. And that's a key element to successful leadership. And what we're
yeah,
talking about
everyone is
starts from
a
within.
CEO. Sure, everybody is a CEO of their own life. So let's get practical. What's one of the key leadership principles that people can apply to their everyday personal development starting today?
Great question. So, something that I tell audiences all the time: before you can effectively lead others, you need to be able to lead your own life. And Montel, I'm a big believer that most people in life are bad at most things. We're all good at a few things, and we all have one thing about us that makes us special, that makes us unique, that makes us different. And I would encourage every single person watching, every single person listening, to start today to get on this journey of self discovery. Ask yourself, what is it about you that makes you special? What is it about you that makes you different? What is it about you that makes you unique? What is it about you that allows you to be you? And that is the first step toward being the best version of yourself, that is the first step toward being the best leader that you can possibly be.
If you don't mind, let me tell you, that's kind of like encapsulates, a saying that I have, and that is, I alone own the definition of who I am. But the only way get to own the definition of who I am is by literally checking in with myself to figure out who am I. And I know that sounds weird, checking in with myself to see who am I. One of the things I did, it was kind of like an exercise. I spent a lot of time when I was in the military under the water. I was deployed on submarines multiple times, three times, as a matter of fact. And each one of those missions were over 90 days each. So that means when the hatch closes, the hatch doesn't open up again for 90 days. You're gone. And I was in probably all of those three missions were as close to real time wartime exercises that we could have possibly been in. We were in harm's way in the Devil's Den backyard and navigating under the water between 200 and 300 feet below the water every day for 90 days plus. And during that period of time, we in the military, there's no longer a regular circadian clock. I mean, yeah, there's a 24-hour military clock, but had no idea how that equated to what's going on outside. You know what I mean? Don't know if the sun's up, don't know if the sun's down. You don't get to look out the periscope. Only three people on the entire ship that I was on got to look out the periscope. That was a captain, the executive officer, and me. So if I wanted to catch the sun, it was literally looking out the periscope, when I afforded the opportunity. And, oh, there's the sun. And there's the sun. But most of the time I looked at the periscope, I was thinking it was daytime, but it was nighttime. So, again, you're up for 18-hour watches. You get maybe 6 hours of sleep, maybe 5.5 one day. Maybe one day you're up for 2 hours. You got to lay down for 3 or 4 hours because you're going to be up for the next 27 hours. And, hard to fall asleep, because, it could be like in the middle of the day, your day, you just woke up 3 hours ago, but you know that in 6 hours, you're not going to be able to sleep for another 27 hours. So you better catch sleep if you can. So what I would do is I would lay in my rack and I would literally pick a time in my life in my past. And I would see how far back I could remember in life. I'm telling you, I'm laying in a bed. At that point in time, I'm late 20s, early 30s, getting ready to be 30. And I literally would try to see if I could remember things that happened to me when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And each time I would remember an incident, I would literally take that incident apart, take it apart and try to figure out, why did I react that way at that time to something that happened? My behavior was really out of place and out of whack. It was unnecessary. I had an attitude about this, or I had an attitude about that. Why did I have an attitude? Where did that come from? Was that something that I developed myself? Was that something that I created for myself? And what I started to notice is that over the course of the 90 days, you do that every day. You start to not question yourself, but you start to understand why like if you ever, I don't know, and how old are you, sir?
42.
All right, so 42. So if, let's say tomorrow, you try to do this exercise and you say to yourself, I'm going to look back to when I was 32. And I remember, I was at a seminar after school, and somebody said something to me, and I turned around to him and I was like, who the fuck are you? I made some really nasty comment. Why did I make that nasty comment? What triggered that in me to make me say something that was so abusive to somebody else? And do I ever have to do that again? And as I continued to do that, pick points in time in my life, in my past, that made me question how I developed the values that I have, made me better understand who I am as a person. So that's why when I say I alone own the definition of who I am, I've taken the time to understand how that definition evolved. And I mean, I kind of feel like that's kind of like part of what you were saying when you think about getting to know who you are, getting to know why you react to things, getting to first off, once you do that, it changes the dynamic of how you react to people, period. Because sometimes you understand that somebody just said something to you that's a trigger from teenage years where I wasn't intellectually developed enough to be able to handle a comment or whatever the person said. And now that I can, now let me take apart what they had to say. So I don't know, but I just throw that out because I mean one of the things that when I ask you a question of what do people have to do? What's that one thing that you think people can do to see if they can start their own personal development and in the leadership position? It's not going out and getting a job where you got that title on a card. It's developing the ability to have a title on a card from within.
100%. And Montel, I love everything you shared. I love the exercise that you went through, and it's going to be a little bit different for everyone because not everyone has gone through your life experiences. But the framework that you shared is so applicable, and something that a Fortune 500 CEO shared with me in one of my episodes of 30-Minute Mentors, which I love. You need to look inward and you need to look outward. You spoke a lot about looking inward, and there are different ways to look inward. You shared a great way. I encourage audiences to ask themselves different questions. What do I love doing and why? What fuels me? What energizes me? What fires me up? What can I do all day, every single day without getting bored and why? I have a series of questions. But the other component is looking outward. Who are the people around you that know you, who can tell you what makes you special, what makes you different, what makes you unique? Feedback is something that fuels all the greats. And the more open you are to feedback, the more receptive you are to feedback, the more proactively you seek feedback, the more quickly you're going to be able to become your best self. And I would encourage anyone watching, anyone listening, to ask as many people as possible. Ask your friends, ask your neighbors, ask your family members, ask mentors, ask people who know you intimately, and ask people who maybe know you a little bit. But all those different perspectives will give you a much better idea of what makes you you. There's going to be a commonality, there's going to be a common thread, and it's going to resonate once you hear it.
Adam, I think you're so right, sir. But I think what people need to understand, and add a little caveat to that is, if you ask for feedback, make sure you stop and listen to it. You don't have to react to it. Don't judge it. First off, you ask for it. And secondly, sometimes people may give you feedback that you think, oh, that's not me. I'm not, well, I'll tell you, I was at an event, you know, um, about a week ago. I was in my studio about a week ago, and I remember interacting with for a segment at the studio I was in. I tape a show every couple of weeks. It's called Bouncing Act, and I just taped a segment of a show, and I got done taping that segment, and I had a short interaction with the producer in between. Went back to my room. The producer came up and asked me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm okay." She said, "Yeah, I'm sorry. You just seemed a little abrupt when we." I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry." I didn't mean that. Okay, fine, thank you. And I stopped there. I said, I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. No, I think I was just thinking ahead of the segment that's coming up. So I wasn't trying to be abrupt. So I thank you for telling me that. And I went to my room and I sat there for a second and I played that interaction back through my brain to try to figure out what it is that I did that gave them that impression. And then after a few minutes of really, really, really thinking about it without judging the other person, I realized that, I kind of spoke to someone walking away over my shoulder. And I realized that this is the type of person who probably thought that I was not being flippant, but I wasn't giving them the amount of attention that they wanted. And I had stopped and turned around and looked at them in the face when I answered their question. And from that point forth, I mean, I've had no issue, and we were fine for the rest of the day. And they recognized that maybe they had overreacted a little bit. And matter of fact, the person came up to me and said later, when I said that to you earlier, I'm sorry. It was real. I had just come out of a meeting with somebody else, and I was a little bit just verklempt. So I apologize, and but it took that moment just to realize that I got to be careful because as you're doing stuff yourself and somebody says something to you, you keep doing your stuff. You know, always be in that moment. Stop. Be in that moment. Listen to what that person has to say to you. Actively listen. Actively pay attention. When that conversation is done, then you move on. try to answer a question while you're trying to run to the next location.
Montel, I literally couldn't agree with you more. You bring up a couple of really interesting and important topics for anyone interested in becoming a great leader. Great leaders are great listeners. Great leaders ask great questions. Great leaders are curious. Great leaders want to know as much as possible. Don't walk into a room intent on hearing themselves speak. Don't really care about hearing their own voices. They want to learn as much as possible. They want to collect as much information as they can. That's what the best leaders are focused on. And what you shared about your interaction that day in the studio, the very best leaders are present. There is no substitute for showing up, being present. The person who you're across from knows whether you're there, fully present, fully engaged with them, or whether you're just there and distracted and doing something else. And for anyone consuming this, if you think back to the leaders who you've been around, the very best leaders and the very worst leaders, I guarantee you, the very best leaders, when you are in their presence, you feel their presence because they're with you. And the worst leaders, they're probably not really giving you the time of day.
You're absolutely right. And, I just appreciate the fact that you understand that the best leaders are the best listeners. You have to, and sometimes, people don't understand when you say, people ask me, what's one of the best things about, or best things about being a talk show host or having your own podcast? My own podcast sometimes is, for me, yeah, I love to interact with people like you so that we can bounce off each other and we can share, our thoughts with our listeners. But I try my best to keep my mouth shut if I can. You know what I mean? Because and sometimes I like to make sure if I heard something correctly. And there's a very interesting tool that people can use. It's called the mimic. You know what I mean? If you're in a conversation with somebody and you're about to, and it's an important conversation, you don't want to leave that conversation having left anything on the floor or anything on the table. You want to leave that conversation making sure that you picked up everything that the other person had to say. And so, one of the ways to do that is to, when a person speaks and they're speaking to you and explaining something, make sure that when you listen, your answer to what they may have said might be, let me get this straight. Did you say X, Y, Z, 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 or did you say X, Y, Z, Y, Z, Z, Y, Z? You know what I mean? And then let that person fill in the blanks so that you don't walk away with something that you misconceived in your brain as to what they had to say. So actively listening is a really important tool, I think, for any leader.
And Montel, it's such an interesting technique. I hadn't heard that before. I believe very strongly that so much of active listening revolves around how much you care about the other person, how much you care about receiving information from other people. And there's a direct correlation between showing up and caring about other people and showing up and actively listening. And if you're the kind of person that walks into a room and all you do is speak and all you do is try to demonstrate how much you know, what are you going to learn? How are you going to lead? Those are the leaders that no one wants to be around. Those are the leaders that no one wants to work for.
And if we're talking about leadership, not just from a corporate standpoint or leadership from a job standpoint, we're talking about leadership in your own house, your own relationship, your own family. How often do parents dictate things to their kids and don't wait to hear an answer from them? How often do you have an argument with the person that you love, your spouse, your significant other, and you realize that the argument was really based on the fact that you didn't hear what they had to say, because they said something to you, and instead of you listening, all you heard was you, rather than hear what they had to say. You took the you as if it was some sort of an aspersion. It's not. Sometimes when people are expressing their feelings, they say, well, you hurt my feelings 5 minutes ago when you said X, Y, Z. What do you mean I hurt your feelings? No, stop for a second. You're saying I hurt your feelings when I rolled my eyes. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to roll my eyes. I wasn't really rolling my eyes. I was really kind of just, trying to seriously think about what happened. But you know what I mean? But so that tool of active listening you can utilize in your everyday relationships. I used to have it as a sign on the refrigerator. I don't need it there anymore. But I used to put a sign up there for I and my wife when we were if we were having a discussion about something earlier in our relationship. The sign I had on my refrigerator was "Speak without offending, listen without defending." Speak without offending, listen without defending. That means that when I have a conversation with the person I say I love, shut my mouth for a second, listen to what they had to say. Don't get offended. That's their opinion. Okay, that's okay. That's a good opinion. And then maybe that makes me help understand them a little bit better. And now when I speak back and address whatever that issue is, I'm going to make sure I take the you out of it. I'm not going to say you did the no, no, no. I understand that while we were talking, I get what I did, and I hold myself responsible for that. And so I'm sorry, but now let's kind of talk through this again. So the other night when I said at 2 o'clock let's go to dinner, and then I get home until 7 o'clock, and it was way too late because we don't like to go to dinner that late. Part of that was because I got caught up at work, and I really am sorry for that. Next time, if I make a plan, I don't give a damn what happens at work. I'm gonna keep that plan. Something like that. I don't know. But as long as you stop and you listen and you understand that those words, I and you, are so powerful and often overused in conversations in ways that they shouldn't be used. Because when we address something with another person and we start saying you, they take that as if a finger's pointing right in their chest and punching them. Slow that you down. And if you're always I, well, you clearly understand what that's going to get you, right?
100%. And Montel, everything you're sharing really speaks to another critical trait among the very best leaders, and not only the very best leaders in business or in government or in sports or in anything professional, but in your family, among your friends, and that's humility. Not assuming that you know everything, not thinking that you have all the answers. No one has all the answers. In fact, the very best leaders know that they don't have all the answers, but the answers are somewhere. And their job is to surface the right answer.
Right.
And using your example of being a parent or being a good partner or spouse, I think about my parents and I think about my siblings who are parents. And when I was a kid, I thought my parents had all the answers. And as I got older, I realized that my parents didn't have all the answers. They were trying their best. And having the humility to realize that even though you have to make a decision, you're making a decision with imperfect information. And if you try to get the best information possible, you're going to be more likely to make the best decision possible. The only way you're going to do that is when you approach your life with humility. When you think you know everything, you're going to be a terrible leader in business and a terrible leader as a human being.
Absolutely. Now, you've talked to hundreds of highly successful people. What have you learned about the way they handle failure? Failure, which is a big deal, I'm telling you, and setbacks. Sometimes things will hit you in your personal life and that, you have no control over. And, a lot of times our some of our best leaders show us by example how to handle those things that they fail at or there are setbacks. They don't give up. But why don't you tell me, what are some of the best things you've heard from them?
I love this topic, and it's a topic that I explore with almost every leader who I interview. And I hear virtually the same thing from almost every single top leader who I speak to, which is that failure isn't terminal. On the contrary, failure is a learning experience. Failure is something that helps you get better. Failure is an opportunity to grow. Failure is an opportunity to help you become an even better leader. The first thing you have to do when you fail is acknowledge that you failed. Everyone makes mistakes. I had a teacher when I was in graduate school who was the former mayor of Los Angeles. He became the friend and a mentor, Richard Riordan, and he had many great lines. My favorite line, which I quote all the time: "Only a mediocre person never makes a mistake." If you're too afraid to try, you're never going to be successful at anything. So we're making mistakes every day, especially if we're striving for greatness. So understand that mistakes and failure are part of the process. The first thing you have to do is try. When you try and fail, acknowledge it, own it, realize that it happened, and then learn from it. The worst thing you can do is make the same mistake twice, or even worse, make it 3 times or 4 times. View it as an opportunity to help you become even better. That's what the greats do.
Absolutely. And especially, and I love the fact that you have to really, again, it's one of those times where you can, you know, we don't slow down enough in life, I don't think, to really take a minute to look back at moments, time capsules in our lives. But if you fail at something, let's say you started, I've been in multiple different entrepreneurial kind of jobs and positions, and I've been working in one space for now almost 25 years, trying to crack this nut. And have I made mistakes along the way? Yes. Some of those are mistakes made in picking the wrong, people to partner up with or collaborate with. Some of those mistakes were made in picking the wrong idea that took me a little while to recognize that it wasn't something that really was good for the type of industry that I was in. And so, but the only way you can figure that out is by really stopping and taking a look at the breadth of what you're talking about. So, if you make a shot, I don't know, I'll just make this up. Let's say you wanted to open up an ice cream store. Well, if I look back and thought to myself, well, why did my ice cream store fail? Well, maybe it's because I really didn't do the homework that I should have done, considering the environment that I live in and looking at, the locales around me. How many ice cream stores are in my particular district? And how many other, forget just the ice cream stores, how many other places actually sell ice cream? There are restaurants that sell ice cream. There are other small little bodegas that sell ice cream. Oh my goodness, I tried to put an ice cream store in a corner where there was already 95 ice cream stores within 4 blocks. You got to really, really take a look at where are the places that I made the mistake. Investigate it. There's nothing wrong with that. Understand that, so that once you investigate, you understand where your mistakes are. Then as you proceed down that path trying to make that business work, at least you'll be one step ahead of where you were before when you try to start it the first time.
100%. And there's a reason why virtually every entrepreneur fails in their first business. And you look at even the most successful entrepreneurs who've built multi-billion dollar companies. When you look at their first business, it wasn't anywhere near what they would have been able to build. And most times it failed. Why is that? For the exact reason that you shared, because that first business was their real MBA. I
Mm-hmm.
got an MBA. I went to business school for 4 years before that as an undergrad. Nothing you learn in business school is anything close to what you learn in the school of hard knocks.
Correct.
And there's no teacher like failure. When you win a game, Montel, I don't know if you played, you did, you played ball growing up.
Play what?
You played ball growing up.
Oh yeah, football and basketball. Yep.
I played a lot of sports. My main sport was baseball. And when you win a game, you feel really good. Maybe you think a little bit about, oh, I could have done this a little bit differently, but you're mainly thinking about what went well, and you're happy about the fact that you won. But when you lose, man, you're sitting on everything that went wrong. And that's when you learn, and that's how you get better. It's no different in business, it's no different in life.
Understanding that, what inspired you to pursue a path of entrepreneurship and leadership and entrepreneurship, especially in the sense that that entrepreneurs, it is a tough road, one that you got to have thick skin and you got to be able to pick yourself up and wipe yourself off and keep trying. I mean, what inspired you to pursue a path that you knew was going to be so difficult? Excuse me.
Yeah, that's a great question. And before I became an entrepreneur, I was warned by many people this is going to be incredibly hard. And I thought I was an active listener. I thought I understood, but you don't really know until you do it. I didn't really appreciate how hard it was until I went and did it myself. But in my case, my story, I spent the first 28 years of my life doing everything that is expected of you. I checked every box that you're supposed to check. I did everything that society tells you need to do. Grew up in Los Angeles, did my undergrad at USC, did really well academically, graduated pretty much at the top of my class, won all the awards and honors you could win. And what happens when you do that is it sets you up on a certain career trajectory. So for me, that meant going and getting a really prestigious job working on Wall Street. I went and worked for big hedge fund. They were actually the biggest hedge fund at the time, very prestigious job. And then after about 2.5 years, I did what you're expected to do. I got my MBA at UCLA, top 10 business school at the time, and continued to check boxes. So when I graduated from UCLA, I went back into finance and worked for another big prestigious company, Fortune 150 global bank. And it was while I was in my late 20s, no one at that time was using the words great resignation. No one at the time was using the words quiet quitting. In all of my time in business school, professors talked about a lot of things, but career centers talked about a lot of things, but no one was really talking about the importance of culture or happiness or fulfillment or anything like that in the workplace. And when I was 28, man, it hit me hard that everything I was doing was what was expected of me and not in service of anything greater. Wasn't having any kind of happiness, fulfillment, meaning, joy, purpose. Everything that everyone understands is important now.
Hmm.
And I knew that what I was doing wasn't it, but I wasn't really sure what was it. And after some soul searching, I wound up going into business with my brother, who's super entrepreneurial. And that was how I became an entrepreneur. So, kind of an accidental entrepreneur. And it wasn't something that when I was 5 years old or 7 years old or 21 years old, I sought out to do. But life shapes out in unexpected ways. And that was my path to entrepreneurship.
Wow. So, what would you say are the three most important qualities for a leader to possess in today's world? Because today is a crazy place, my friend.
Oh my God, I love that question. I have a list that I share with audiences when I give keynotes, and it's a long list. And I have 9 on that list, but I'll give you 3.
Okay.
Self awareness, essential. We talked about it. You talked about it extensively. I talked about it a little bit. That's a huge one. Another one, which is a big one, is love of people. If you don't love people, there are plenty of things that you can do in life and be really successful in. We could probably spend the next hour just talking about all the different career paths that anyone can pursue and be successful in if they don't love people. But you're not going to be a successful leader. You have to love people if you want to lead people. The third one, which is one that might be a little bit underrated, but it's one we talked about, is curiosity. The most successful leaders are genuinely interested in learning, genuinely interested in understanding what is going on around them. It speaks to all the things we've been talking about. It speaks to the importance of being a great listener, it speaks to the importance of lifelong learning, continually growing. The very best leaders are lifelong learners. The very best leaders aren't this has been a big learning for me in my interviews with America's most successful leaders. The very best leaders don't really think about the fact that they're the very best leaders. What they think about is what do I need to do to get better? They're not thinking about what I've done so far that's allowed me to get to where I am. They think about what do I need to do to continue to excel.
It's
And
that.
that
It's that.
mindset is such a big differentiator.
It's a great, great, great statement right there. Because one of the other things that I've kind of lived by my whole life is I try to go to bed at night and think to myself, what did I do today that's worth talking about tomorrow? What I did today is about tomorrow. What I did yesterday, that's already gone. As much as we like to go back and pat ourselves on the back for yesterday, yesterday is yesterday. But what did I do today that's worth talking about tomorrow? And, I think a lot of leaders and good leaders understand that idea of what they have to work on for themselves to make sure that tomorrow is a better day. Can you share a moment in your, let's say, in your past, that a defining moment that helped shape your career and your approach to leadership?
Yeah, Montel, absolutely. Before I do, I just want to say that I love what you shared, and it brings me back to a quote that I absolutely love, and that's a quote from Satchel Paige. I don't know if we have any big baseball fans tuning in, but Satchel Paige, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, who didn't have the opportunity to play Major League Baseball until he was way, way, way past his prime because of his skin color. And what was Satchel Paige's famous quote? Don't look back.
Hmm.
His entire career was, you could argue, was robbed because of racism, because of discrimination, because of injustice. That wasn't his mindset. Don't look back. Something might be gaining on you. And that was how he lived his life. That is how we should live our lives to become our best selves.
Absolutely.
To
And
answer,
no, I'm sorry.
sorry,
Okay. What were you going to say?
um, well, I was going to answer your question unless you wanted to build on that point, but you tell me.
No, I love that point. But go ahead and answer that question. What happened? What was it? The realization of that Satchel Paige quote that helped you shape your career and your approach to leadership, or what was
No, I just had to throw that quote out there because I loved what you shared, and I love Satchel Paige, and I love baseball, and I love that quote. So it just
it?
all came together. But a really early leadership moment for me was kind of a moment that we all think about defining moments. And when I was in eighth grade, I was student body president, and this was a moment that I think back on. And when I was student body president, the principal of the school was a really bad leader. He was a toxic leader. He possessed a lot of the traits that, when we talk about what not to do as a leader, that was what this guy had. And it was graduation, and I was in graduation rehearsals preparing the speech. I gave the dry run speech. And when I gave the speech, I included some jokes that were pretty lighthearted jokes that people were laughing at. It was all good natured. And after the rehearsal, the principal came to me and said, if you tell these jokes during the speech, I'm going to cut your mic. And I was blown away. These were not offensive jokes. These were the most lighthearted, innocent jokes. But it was a power trip. It was an ego trip. And I was a good kid. Like I said, I played by the rules, but I felt like that was crossing the line. And I did what I would do now. I asked a lot of people in my life, what should I do? I asked for advice. I asked for guidance. I asked my parents, what do you think I should do? And something that I learned back then is, the more you ask people for advice, the more you realize that ultimately you have to make the decision yourself. People might tell you what to do, but the best mentors aren't going to tell you what to do. They're going to guide you to the decision that you ultimately have to make for yourself. But
Yes.
the decision that I made was, I went ahead and gave the speech and tested him, and he didn't pull the mic. And what I realized in that moment is that you have to be true to yourself. You have to be authentic to what you believe. And I felt like that was the right thing to do. I did it. I went through with it, and people laughed, and it worked out. And I was in eighth grade, but it was a moment that I look back on that was defining in some ways.
I'm laughing a little bit because very similar to you, when I was in high school, I was the junior year class president and senior year class president. And it's very, very funny because pretty similar thing happened. Here's what happened. It was at the end of my junior year. I just got elected as the senior year president. And I took to the microphone at this big school assembly because they were giving out who got voted in, and of course I got voted in. And I'll never forget this. I stepped up to the microphone and I said, to our class, I was like, we're going to be the greatest class we're going to have. Because what had happened in my junior year, I had done something that the school and the community, everybody had frowned upon. I had announced and set it up so that the junior class could have a prom outside of the school that we went and rented a facility for to hold it. And why? Because our junior year class, my junior year, we were making more money than any class had ever done before this. And it was a couple of reasons for that. I won't go into detail, but we made a lot of money our junior year and our senior year. I kept looking for silly stuff to do that our class could do to get in money. And then we took that money, used that money to rent a location for a prom. And I got in trouble for that because, juniors were never supposed to have a prom outside of school, supposed to be in a gymnasium. And I got called in and raked over the coals. So this was right after I had already been raked over the coals. I get elected senior year class president for the next year. So it's the end of the year assembly. And I stood up there on the stage and I said, and next year, we're not going to have just one senior hook day. We're going to have two. And I'm telling you, that principal came running out there, saying, the microphone. I got suspended from school for 2 days. I was like, oh man, you know what I mean? But didn't we have two senior year hook days? Yes, we did. And and the thing that was so cool about it is that again, my senior year, our class made more money. That was kind of ridiculous the amount of money we made. So we were able to have a senior prom that was like unprecedented in our county. But it was just so funny when you were saying that at Craig because I remember the principal like looking at me on the side of the stage saying, don't. I went ahead and said it. It was so funny.
You know what, Montel? A topic that we haven't talked about yet, but is so important
Sure.
as we think about leadership, which just ties into all this, is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
The most successful leaders are authentically themselves. You have to be yourself. And going back to that moment in eighth grade and going back to your story about challenging your principal, very similar stories, a lot of parallels there. And a big takeaway is that if you want to be great in anything you do, you're not going to be great if you're trying to be someone else. You're not going to be great if you try to be what you think other people want you to be. You need to show up every day as yourself. And the people who are the very best in whatever they do are authentically themselves every day. There's no substitute for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. I'm glad you put that in there, sir. I would have been, I'm so glad that's part of this podcast because I hope that everybody at home recognizes that's the fact. You say it every time. Show up authentic. That's the whole thing. That's the answer to I think, life's most, pervasive riddles is show up every day, your authentic self. How do you stay motivated, my friend, and maintain a focus faced with significant challenges?
I love that question. Something that I share all the time when I give keynotes on my podcast, when I'm talking to friends, when I'm talking to my students. There are three things that you have to do when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. Number one, you've got to do something that you love. Number two, you've got to do something that you're great at. Number three, you've got to do something that allows you to make a positive impact in the lives of others. And if you're doing all three of those things, you're going to be motivated. You're going to wake up every day fired up, ready to get at it. Last night was a Sunday night, and I went to sleep pretty late. I spent most of the Sunday working. Today, here, Monday morning, long day with a calendar full of red, but it's all stuff that I'm excited about. And when you love what you do, when you're doing something that you're good at, and when you know that what you're doing makes a difference in other people's lives, you don't need someone to motivate you. You don't need motivational quotes. You don't need posters. You don't need someone yelling or screaming at you. All you need is to wake up in the morning because you're so fired up to get at it. That's what does it for me.
Gotcha. Well, look, we're almost out of time, my friend, but I want to just ask you one more question. What strategies do you use to build and maintain strong relationships with your team and your stakeholders?
Yeah, great question. I feel like we could spend an entire podcast
Sure.
just on that. But the biggest thing that I try to do is I try to be nice to people. I try to be kind. I try to be authentic. I try to be genuine. I try to treat people like people. At the end of the day, no matter who it is that you're leading, no matter where they live, no matter how old they are, how young they are, who they are, they're human beings. And every single person is a person. They're their own unique individual. I try to get to know them, try to understand what motivates them, what drives them. And at the heart of great leadership is individual relationships. No two people are the same. The very best leaders understand that. And in my approach to leadership, I try to live that. I try to treat every single person who I lead as a friend because that's how I view it. And uh, people who I no longer work with, but used to lead, I still consider friends. That's how I try to show up every day as a leader.
You know, I'm out. I just said I'm almost out of time, but I can't let you go without asking this because I really need to pick your leadership acumen to come to an understanding or an idea in my own brain. But when we look at the people around us that we call leaders today, I'm talking from the top on down. I'm specifically going to throw you in the middle, throw a little monkey wrench at you. You don't need to get political, and I'm not trying to make you be political. But what I'm saying is that when we look at our politicians, who we call our leaders, we recognize that. So sorry, there's such a paucity of leadership in the ranks of our Senate and our Congress because all those people are there are doing nothing but being, puppy dog followers. They're none of them have any individual new thought. They just are trying to kiss as much ass as they can, excuse my mouth, to get us all nowhere. What do you think it's going to take for America to recapture that sense of leadership that we had in the, I'm going to tell you, sometimes in the 30s and the 40s, even though society wasn't perfect, but there were some leaders that started developing in the 30s, late 30s, early 40s, early 50s, who recognized that the norm is not the best. Now we've got a group of people who literally are doing as much as they can to throw out their own individuality and just kiss the ass of whoever they think is ahead of them. What do you think it's going to take to motivate the next generation to want to take the charge of doing something better than just living up to the status quo of somebody else?
For starters, I think it's clear, should be clear to anyone and everyone, the cavalry isn't coming.
Right.
And there's no one coming to save you. If you've been waiting around for someone on a white horse to come and save you, that isn't happening. That hasn't happened. It's on us. It requires every single one of us to show up. And Montel, to your point, what's transpired in our country over this last period of time should illustrate to everyone how important it is for every single person to step up. Every single person owns this. Every single person has a responsibility to do whatever they can to step up every single day in their own way, however it is. We all have different platforms, we all have different ways that we lead, influence, impact, but it's on us. You can't shirk from that responsibility. When if you want to talk about America and our responsibilities as Americans, this is a big part of it. If you live in this country, if you live in America and you want to have America be the America that we all believe in, it's on us as citizens, it's on us as individuals to show up every day and ask ourselves, what can we do to be our best selves? What can we do to live up to the ideals that will make this country what it should be? And that is a huge part of it. So uh, I had lunch a number of years ago with a top political strategist who's elected a lot of responsible for electing a lot of senators and governors and was involved in a lot of presidential campaigns. Something that he shared with me when I got into this subject with him, he said to me, voters get the candidates that they deserve. And that stuck with me. We're in a democracy. We vote for our elected officials. Now, we could talk about gerrymandering and you can talk about, I live in California and that's who I vote for. And it's a complicated topic, but at the end of the day, if you look at it holistically, we have ownership. We as a people have ownership here, and it's on us to show up. How many people actually vote? Not a lot. How many people use their voice? How many people are bringing their best selves to the table? How many people really care? Montel, um, when you look at the statistics of the last election, and I personally, you know, I'm very engaged. I'm very passionate. My platform, 30-Minute Mentors, I interview many of America's top political leaders. We don't really talk about politics. We talk about leadership. And my goal is to try to bring in people from all political backgrounds, all political stripes, Democrat, Republican, independent, regardless of what my own political views are. But something that is very interesting to me when you look at how voters who were educated and informed voted compared to how voters who weren't educated and informed voted, night and day. Big part of it is just educating yourself, being aware of what's going on, and using your voice in the voting booth. So there are a lot of things we can do. But going back to what we originally talked about, it starts with us. You can't outsource leadership. You can't outsource this. It starts with you.
Absolutely. Show up or shut up. You know what I mean?
You said it.
Adam, I can't thank you enough, sir, for being a part of the show today. I think your words are going to resonate very deeply with our listeners, and love to have you back another time, man. Like you said, you and I could chop it up for hours, my friend.
Hey, Montel, I appreciate it, man. Always been a fan of your work. Always have enjoyed everything that you've contributed to the country. Loved having you on 30-Minute Mentors was such a highlight, and was such a highlight being here with you today. Thanks a lot for having me.
I really appreciate it, sir. You take care of yourself. Love that family of yours, and we'll see you the next time, okay? And for you guys out there, make sure you keep tuning in to Free Thinking with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.